He stood against the wall by the janitor's supply closet, his once sturdy boots caked in mud and his old flannel shirt threadbare at the shoulders, when the CEO coldly pointed at him and sneered, "You think you can fix this $6 million machine?" The entire factory erupted in mocking laughter. After all, to them, he was just the black farmer's kid, a nameless shadow among their esteemed engineers. But the moment that quiet teenager strode forward, what happened next left every last person in the room frozen in stunned silence. Nobody knew who his father really was, and no one guessed the secret this unassuming young man carried, one that would change their lives and the fate of this factory forever. The air inside Emerson Robotics felt suffocating, as if even the thick concrete walls were bearing the silent dread of hundreds of people. Everywhere you turned, the scent of oil and cold metal lingered like a haunting memory. The clanking of heavy machinery, once the heartbeat of this place, now served as a constant reminder of a failure none dared to name: defeat. It had been 2 weeks since the $6 million automated production line at Emerson Robotics ground to a halt. First came minor glitches, then inexplicable breakdowns. That once vaunted technological marvel lay silent, a chilling monument to collapse. Dozens of engineers, both American and foreign specialists flown in at great expense, had tried every conceivable fix. The electronics control room burned bright through countless nights as circuit boards were meticulously examined, every screw and wire scrutinized. But in the end, all anyone had to show for their efforts were shrugging shoulders, averted gazes, and whispered comments whenever a manager passed by. "I just don't think this time it can be saved." With each passing day, the pressure crushed down on the shoulders of every worker and leader. No one dared voice it, but everyone understood. Without a solution soon, hundreds would lose their jobs, and their families would face ruin. Even those once proud of their skills and degrees felt insignificant under the looming shadow of failure. In a dimly lit corner at the far end of the corridor, 13-year-old Malik Evans sat curled on an old wooden chair. His flannel shirt hung in tatters at the shoulder, and his boots still bore the brown soil of the farm. He watched the hurried flow of factory workers, unnoticed, a silent observer. Malik was an outsider here. He'd come along to wait for his uncle, James Evans, who was finishing the late-night cleaning shift. Behind Malik's calm, curious gaze lay something far greater than anyone imagined, something even he hadn't dared to dream. In that lingering darkness, no one realized that this humble farmer's son, the quiet boy in the muddy boots, was about to rewrite the destiny of an entire factory. No one at the factory knew that, as Malik Evans sat huddled in that shadowy corner, another storm was brewing at Emerson Robotics, this time not of metal and wires, but of flesh and blood. That morning, the factory apron thundered with the roar of a Gulfstream G650's engines. Beneath the cold glare of the sun, a tall figure stepped out, his polished leather shoes clicking against the immaculate pavement. It was Preston Hayes, the new CEO of Emerson Robotics, a name that sent a ripple of apprehension through the tech industry. Preston carried himself with the unmistakable air of the elite, a perfectly tailored gray suit, a muted silk tie, and a gleaming Swiss watch on his wrist. He was famed not only for his talent in turning failing ventures around, but also for his ruthless, icy demeanor. He had once shut down an entire production line with a single brief meeting, and reveled in watching fear flicker across his subordinates' faces. As he entered the plant, Preston immediately sensed the thick tension in the air. He concealed neither his disgust at the grime nor his contempt for the ordinary laborers around him. To Preston, people like Malik Evans, mud-stained boots and faded flannel shirt, were nothing more than nameless shadows, the silent detritus of the vast industrial machine he now presided over. An emergency meeting was called in the control room under harsh white neon lights that only heightened the atmosphere's chill. Preston sat at the head of the table, steel-cold eyes tapping a pen against the surface as he listened to department heads' report. Explanations about system errors, faulty circuit boards, and incompatible software only served to worsen his irritation. With each cutting question, his impatience crackled in the air. 2 weeks, $6 million, and you still can't get this machine running. He stopped tapping. Planting both hands on the table, he leaned forward, his voice rolling out with barbed sarcasm. If you can't fix it, maybe you ought to let the janitors have a go. His words fell into the room like a blade, slicing through the tension. People exchanged uneasy glances. A few stifled derisive laughs. Some eyes flicked toward the frosted glass where Malik Evans stood, unnoticed, now the target of Preston's cruel jibe. But for Preston, it was no mere joke. He used mockery as a weapon to cement his absolute authority. He delighted in reminding every employee, both arrogant engineers and silent laborers, that only he decided their fates. Wherever he went, Preston sowed fear and doubt, broadcasting a chilling message: don't ever think you're important enough to be heard. Under that stark white light, nervous laughter mingled with anxiety, and Malik Evans, even as a peripheral shadow, felt the weight of power and prejudice pressing down. Yet deep in his eyes something began to stir. Not mere hesitation or endurance, but the spark of resistance, like a small flame waiting to erupt in the dark. No one in the meeting room could shake the faint laughter that followed Preston Hayes's barbed remark. Like an electric current, his mockery quickly seeped into every corner of the plant. At the front rows, the engineers, department heads, and managers, no one dared openly object. Yet their eyes betrayed a mixture of amusement and relief, as though they'd just been absolved of a crushing responsibility. Some stifled chuckles, others sneered at Malik through the frosted glass. In a far corner, a few white engineers whispered loudly enough for Malik to hear. These farm boys belong out in the fields steering tractors, not fixing a $6 million machine. Hey, maybe if they're good at trash duty, they'll get lucky and actually fix it, once. Even the employees of color who had endured slights and exclusion in the past kept their heads down in silence, afraid they'd be next if they spoke up. It was as if Preston Hayes's shadow had grown so vast that not even those who'd suffered injustice before felt brave enough to defend the weaker. Malik Evans stood by the glass, shoulders hunched but back straight. He heard every whisper, every derisive laugh, every judging gaze passing over him, a cocktail of chill and pain. Prejudice was no stranger to Malik. He'd grown up under the weight of judgment, always placed at the bottom tier in every classroom and every social gathering in his small hometown. But now, the sting was sharper, more vivid, and bare than ever. On the opposite side of the hallway, Malik's uncle, James Evans, the lifelong janitor, peeked out from behind his cleaning cart, his eyes heavy with concern. James knew all too well the layers of bias in this factory, how every step and every word was measured against the color of one's skin and the uniform one wore. He stepped forward, voice low and heavy. "Malik, you don't have to take this humiliation. Let's go home. This place isn't built for people like us." But Malik didn't move. He gripped his backpack strap, his eyes shining with a strange resolve. Deep inside him, a quiet steadiness welled up, as though in this very place where everyone expected him to bow out, Malik had found his reason to stand tall and endure. He knew that if he walked away now, the jokes and contempt would remain, not just for him, but for every other poor black kid who would pass through these gates in the future. Back in the room, Preston Hayes glanced at Malik one more time, a half-smirk playing on his lips, an expression of dominance and challenge. He delighted in how his words could drive someone to rock bottom, all to elevate his own authority. And with that, the meeting resumed. Reports and phone calls filling the air, unaware that at that very moment a circle of prejudice was quietly about to be broken, not by power, but by the silent, smoldering will of Malik Evans. The conference room still echoed with faint laughter after Preston Hayes's loaded remark. Like an electric current, his mockery seeped into every corner of the plant. Those seated in the front rows, engineers, department heads, managers, dared not react aloud, but their eyes gleamed with relief and glee, as if they'd just been relieved of a crushing responsibility. Some pressed their lips to stifle chuckles. Others shot sneering glances at Malik through the frosted glass. In a corner, a few white engineers whispered just loud enough for Malik to hear. These farmhands belong in the fields driving tractors, not fixing a $6 million machine. Hey, maybe if they're good at doing janitorial work, they'll miraculously fix it, just this once. Even employees of color, those who'd been marginalized and overlooked before, kept their heads down, reluctant to be the next target if they spoke up. It was as if Preston's shadow had grown so vast that not even the long-suffering dared to defend the weaker. Malik Evans stood by the glass, his shoulders pulled in but his back held straight. He heard every whisper, every jeer, every judging glance slicing at his pride, yet he didn't flinch. He knew he could walk away, bury his face in a pillow and cry, or he could stand before the pack of wolves and confront the prejudice of those in power. In that very moment, Preston Hayes, immaculate in his crisp suit, salt and pepper hair slicked back, polished leather shoes gleaming, strode directly toward Malik. The harsh neon overhead cast a long, cold shadow across the floor, as if the very embodiment of authority and arrogance. Preston stopped less than a yard away, his eyes narrowing. His voice rang out, equal parts challenge and disdain. You really gonna try, or just stick to cleaning up trash? Laughter erupted, louder this time, unabashed. A few younger managers pulled out their phones, grinning as they hit record. Outside the control room, the engineers huddled, trading high-spirited comments. This is going to be good. They knew well that in this factory, a single mistake, especially from a rural black kid like Malik, would be the perfect spectacle and a stern warning to anyone daring to step out of line. The air felt frozen, strung tight like a guitar string waiting to snap. A middle-aged manager named Mark Benson, known for his prejudice and old-school mindset, spoke up in a loud, deliberate voice. Kid, you better not burn this thing down. It's a $6 million machine, not some old wheelbarrow out back. His words set off another round of raucous laughter. They felt safe behind their crisp shirts, shiny name badges, and positions. None feared the day they might swap places with Malik. Malik said nothing. He simply looked up, locking eyes with Preston. The calm in his gaze made more than a few uneasy. He nodded once, showing neither fear nor anger, then quietly slipped off his backpack and set it on the floor. His mud-caked boots thudded against the factory floor, the sound echoing like a silent declaration of war against everyone who belittled him. He walked toward the central processing area, where the massive automatic packaging line, the pride and torment of Emerson Robotics, stood silent, like a sunken ship. Even the veteran engineers, the so-called pillars of the plant, stepped aside, their eyes a mix of doubt and unspoken challenge. Let's see what this country boy can do beyond providing entertainment. Phones remained leveled at Malik, some even streaming live, eager for the impending disaster. Preston folded his arms, half smiling, his gaze never leaving the teenager's every move. In his mind, this trial by fire wasn't just about Malik. It was a message to everyone who dared question him. Order and power rested solely with Preston Hayes. Behind him, James Evans, Malik's uncle, hovered near the cleaning cart, gripping its handle, his eyes flicking between his nephew and the crowd. Worry etched his face, part fear of public humiliation, part helplessness, unable to shield Malik from this cruel spectacle. "Malik, if you're not sure, you can just say no." But Malik didn't turn. He remembered late nights in the cramped workshop with his father, the smell of oil, his small hands bleeding over a tiny misaligned part. He recalled his mother's proud eyes when he returned home, stained but never bowed. He knew this was more than an opportunity. It was a test of his worth and dignity. He stopped before the silent machine and took a deep breath. Malik studied the darkened control panel, its red LEDs flickering like a dying heartbeat. The lead engineer, Walter Reed, opened his mouth to intervene, but Preston waved him off with a sneer. "Let him try. We're all dying to know if the janitorial prodigy can save $1 million line." Malik nodded, lifting the panel cover. A tangle of colorful wires and hastily crimped connectors lay inside. Some scratched, some barely seated. He surveyed the wiring, his hand trembling under the weight of dozens of watchful eyes and cameras. Yet, in that moment, he seemed to tune out every distraction, as if listening to his own heartbeat. His father's lessons echoed in his mind. "Every system has a rhythm, son. Don't fear big machines, and don't fear people who think they know everything. Be patient, look closely, listen carefully, and you'll find the fault." Malik cross-checked the circuit diagram, then gently traced each connection. The crowd held its breath. Even the loudest mockers quieted at the strange calm and focus on Malik's face. Phones still recording, but now no one remembered why they came. Light from the windows fell across Malik's determined expression. Preston remained arms crossed, but a flicker of doubt showed in his eyes, though his smile stayed firm. To him, a failure here would prove the natural order, and should a miracle occur, he'd twist it into a victory for himself. The entire factory's gaze was fixed on this mud-booted teenager. Malik knew he couldn't step back. This was more than his own trial by fire. It was for his family and every kid labeled an outsider. And, with the quiet courage he'd forged between two worlds, Malik began to work. The teen stood before the silent machine, surrounded by a circle of sharply dressed suits, seasoned faces, and eyes half mocking, half watchful. The air felt heavier for the silence, a stifling quiet laden with invisible judgments bearing down on Malik Evans. Every sigh, every shake of the head, every sidelong glance seemed to underscore the single word: impossible. Emerson Robotics' veteran experts, brought in from top automation firms, folded their arms at the edges, their cold stares tracking every move Malik made. Some turned away, muttering to colleagues, their pursed lips betraying how they viewed this as a waste of time. Another man curled his lip in a faint sneer, treating the moment like the afternoon's entertainment, a comedy whose ending they'd already predicted. James Evans, lurking by the cleaning cart, gripped its cold plastic handle with trembling hands. He watched his nephew, whom he'd always hoped to shield from this place's strife and pain, with profound worry. He stepped closer, voice quavering just enough for Malik to hear. "Malik, don't risk it. Don't turn yourself into the factory's joke." But Malik said nothing. His eyes never left the control panel. In that instant, every warning and every jeer faded away. He felt the subtle vibrations through the machine's casing, vibrations only someone who'd grown up around farm engines and old field machinery could truly sense. He knew that each faint hiss and every irregular blink of the LEDs were the machine's way of crying out for help. Behind him, Preston Hayes still stood with arms crossed, nodding to the managers not to intervene. He tried to keep an indifferent expression, but in his eyes shone the thrill of a predator waiting for his prey to collapse. He spoke up just loud enough for the room to hear. "Let him try. We need some entertainment to break this tense morning. Nobody step in." A group of young engineers whipped out their phones, ready to record Malik's performance for the in-house chat groups, forums teeming with memes mocking the underdog. Their sneering half-smiles cut deep into Malik's pride. Under the stark neon lights, the white glow drew an even sharper line between the workers' blue uniforms and the polished white shirts on the other side. Malik didn't respond or flinch. He inhaled deeply, bent over the main control panel, and ran his fingers along the tiny connectors and circuit traces leading to the central sensor array. He spotted something irregular. A faint, uneven vibration and an LED flash pattern that didn't match the system's default operating code. As Malik removed a small access panel, one of the senior experts, Larry Mitchell, known for his strict, old-guard ways, snorted sarcastically, "Hey, you sure you're not about to make things worse? Where's your toolkit, kid? A mop?" Laughter rippled through the group, but Malik remained silent, working with deliberate care. He reached into his worn backpack and pulled out a multifunction screwdriver, one prized only by those accustomed to jury-rigging farm machinery, and began methodically loosening the tiny fasteners on the control board. His movements were unhurried yet precise, as though he'd done this 100 times before. The expert's expressions began to shift. Malik's quiet confidence and single-minded focus silenced even the oldest, most arrogant among them, who found themselves holding their breath in anticipation. The crowd still watched, but the boisterous mockery had fallen away, replaced by a blend of curiosity and uneasy wonder. Sensing the shift, Preston broke the silence. "Don't get your hopes up. In another minute, we'll have a lesson for this whole factory. Don't let outsiders tinker with the industry leader's technology." James Evans turned away, unable to meet his nephew's gaze. His knuckles whitened around the cart handle as he recalled every humiliation he'd endured for daring to speak up at engineering meetings he was told he had no business attending. He knew Malik faced not just a machine, but a mountain of prejudice, a system built on veils of authority and expertise. Under Malik's careful hands, each component was inspected and tested. He probed the power junctions, scrutinized each solder joint, spots invisible to most, but to Malik, telltale signs of hasty assembly. The atmosphere tightened like a drawn bow. Some engineers, long accustomed to pride in their skill, shot each other glances of dawning shame and uncertainty. They realized this kid wasn't just the janitor's helper, or that black farm boy. He possessed something they'd never had, the ability to listen to machinery, and a heart that wouldn't yield to the crowd. All eyes were fixed on Malik. Some quietly hoped for success. Others still prayed for failure to preserve the familiar order. But every one of them understood that in this moment, Emerson Robotics wasn't just waiting for a machine to be revived, but to see whether a young black boy, underestimated by all, could upend long-held prejudices and rewrite his destiny. Malik tightened his grip on the screwdriver and wiped sweat from his brow. He knew this was his single chance, and with calm courage forged between two worlds, Malik began. Malik tightened his grip on the screwdriver, his palm slick with sweat, but his movements unwavering and decisive. A soft click echoed as he removed the protective cover from the control system, something most outsiders would never dare to touch. All eyes were fixed on him, including those cold, wary gazes of people afraid to be pushed out of their comfort zones. A maze of circuitry sprawled before him like a complex neural network under the harsh white neon. Malek narrowed his eyes, inspecting every connector, every wire, every tiny component. Light glinted off his face, revealing fierce concentration and a quiet intensity, the intensity of someone who knows that a single slip-up could turn him into everyone's eternal punchline. Around him, the veteran engineers of Emerson Robotics, brought in from top automation firms, stood shoulder to shoulder. Their earlier smirks had faded into uneasy uncertainty. Larry Mitchell, the very man who'd mocked Malik, furrowed his brow as he realized the boy's movements weren't clumsy. They were more precise than many newly minted engineers, fresh out of prestigious universities. Malik's hand glided along the circuitry until it paused at a cluster of red and blue wires hooked up backwards. Just then, an anxious junior engineer stepped forward, reaching out to stop him. "Wait, kid, do you even know what you're—" But Preston Hayes only tilted his head, a mocking smile playing on his lips as he urged everyone on. "Let him continue. Isn't everyone here for the show?" Preston's words froze the room. No one dared interrupt, though a strange doubt surfaced in their minds. Quietly, Malik resumed his work, deftly turning tiny screws, removing the miswired connector, and studying the power terminals. His lips pressed into a determined line as he mumbled to himself, "Who wires the poles backwards, like this?" A few older engineers exchanged worried glances. Only those with real hands-on experience recognized the significance of that mistake. Reversed polarity would short the system at startup, rendering any further repairs pointless. But how could this black farmer's son spot what the entire team of experts had missed for 2 weeks? Malik carefully swapped the wire ends, realigned the sensor, and his hands moved with a practiced ease. The metallic clicks rang out in confident rhythm, nothing like the hesitant fumbling of someone under pressure. In his eyes was total focus, as if each circuit and solder joint carried the weight of childhood nights spent tinkering with engines alongside his father in a dusty barn. When he finished, Malik wiped away the grease around the repair site with a cloth and glanced over the wiring diagram one last time. The air around him fell silent. No more taunts or whispers, only heavy stillness tinged with awe and apprehension. Nobody turned away or raised their phones. All eyes were on the teenager working like a seasoned technician. Clara Donnelly, the incisive yet fair chief engineer, stepped closer, watching Malik's hands. She recognized that his technique wasn't just confident. It bore the mark of innate talent, the way he'd identified the fault, corrected the polarity, and recalibrated the sensors. It spoke of someone whose life had been intertwined with machinery, not merely studied in textbooks. Preston maintained his composure, but deep down he sensed a control slipping through his fingers. His brow knitted, lips tightening as he scrutinized Malik's every move, suspicion flickering in his eyes. He knew that if this boy actually fixed the machine, his own authority would be seriously challenged. But if Malik failed, order would be restored to his liking. In a single, small motion, Malik snapped the protective cover back into place and tightened the last screws. He stood upright and looked toward the main control panel. The room felt magnetically charged. Every gaze locked on him. From the back, James Evans clenched his fists, his face a mixture of hope and dread. A few senior engineers, still stunned, began murmuring among themselves, their eyes shining with a newfound, unspoken respect. Malik said nothing. He simply pressed the restart button. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds. Time seemed to freeze. No one dared breathe. Then, a low, resonant hum rolled through the machine like the heartbeat of a giant stirring from a long slumber. The warning lights flipped from red to green, gears began to turn, and the assembly line sprang to life, running smoothly as if it had never broken down. Astonished gasps rose, not from those seeking amusement, but from people who understood they'd just witnessed a miracle, or at least a moment of hidden genius revealed. For a heartbeat, Preston stood speechless, his face drained of color. Clara Donnelly, stunned, then allowed herself a rare, small smile. Malik Evans, the boy they'd all underestimated, had just shown the entire factory, and anyone who doubted him, a simple truth. Talent knows no color, background, or rank. But in that instant, deep in Preston's eyes, and those of the other executives, a vague fear took hold. Because what had just happened signaled that much more was about to change in the days to come. The air in the control room felt as if it had thickened. Every sound hushed, all eyes, brimming with excitement, doubt, even malice, locked on Malik Evans's final movements. When he gently snapped the protective cover back into place, tightened the last screw, and straightened up, it was as if the entire space held nothing but the young black teen's steady breath before the sea of onlookers. Everyone waited, as though the fate of the entire production line, and Malik's own future, hung on the push of that power button. 1. 2 seconds passed, accompanied only by the faint hum of recovering circuitry. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Preston Hayes's face lit with smug anticipation, the corner of his mouth twitching as he prepared to seize this failure and turn it into a spectacle for the whole factory. The engineers behind him began to murmur, poised to unleash another round of ridicule. But just as hope appeared dashed, a low, resonant growl rumbled from the machine's core, like a great beast stirring awake. Warning lights flipped from red to green, LEDs pulsing in sequence down the automated control panel. Then gears, large and small, began to mesh and turn, and the line that had lain dead for 2 weeks sprang to life with a smooth, urgent rhythm. For a heartbeat, everyone stood frozen, unable to believe their eyes. Then the first stunned cheers broke out among the oldest engineers, those who took the deepest pride in their craft. Applause rolled through the plant, not perfunctory but genuine awe and gratitude. The mocking looks of moments before transformed into smiles. A few younger technicians hurriedly put away their phones, embarrassed as they deleted the live stream they'd bet on being the funniest fail of the month. Across the room, James Evans clutched his hands together, tears streaming down his weathered face as a look of utter pride spread across his features. He'd never seen his nephew so strong, and he'd never witnessed those who once scorned him applauding a black boy who had just revived a $1 million machine. But amid the outpouring of applause and celebration, one man remained motionless as a statue. Preston Hayes, the all-powerful CEO who believed everything lay within his grasp, stood there, his face drained of color, eyes darkening. Deep lines creased his brow as he realized no one was following his orders. No mocking laughter pierced the air. Even as he tried to reclaim his authority with a loud voice, his words rang hollow. This was just luck. Maybe the system rebooted itself after the previous repairs. Nobody bothered to respond. They all understood the truth they'd just witnessed. A talent hidden by bias, a reminder that true value doesn't come from power or position. A few young engineers timidly approached Malik, awkwardly extending their hands, eyes wide with newfound respect. Chief Engineer Clara Donnelly was the first to break the remaining silence. She stepped forward, placing a hand on Malik's shoulder, her gaze filled with wonder and admiration. You just did what none of us here could be certain of. It sees what our entire team missed for 2 weeks. How did you know?" Malik exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. His voice was soft but steady. "I used to help my dad fix machines like this out in the fields. You just look, you listen, you feel. Machinery has its own voice if you pay attention." The room fell into a hush, as if each person had been illuminated by something simple yet profound. A few of the veteran experts nodded in agreement, their eyes free of bias and full of pure respect. Then, a single hand broke the silence with a deliberate clap, soon joined by the entire factory in a chorus of recognition, a symphony heralding a new truth taking shape. Cheers and calls of "Malik, Malik" echoed through the plant, while Preston could only stand there, lips pressed tight, fists clenched. But the applause wasn't just for a technical triumph. It celebrated the birth of a new faith, a generation long dismissed and buried beneath the weight of color and class. Malik Evans, once an outsider, now stood at the center of attention, a focal point for everyone's hopes. And deep within the heart of every witness, something had shattered, the thick fog of prejudice blown away by the courage, intelligence, and perseverance of a young black boy who refused to be silenced by fate. Preston Hayes, even in his cold exterior, felt the shift of power in the very factory he once ruled. For the first time, he stood on the margin, watching the old order crack open to make way for something new, no longer his to control. In that moment, Preston understood that some things money, status, and prejudice can never buy: belief, respect, and a community awakened from its slumber. Malik Evans, amid thunderous applause and astonished faces, offered the slightest smile. He knew this was only the beginning. The applause still thundered through the plant, a wave that swept away every barrier and bias freshly broken. Malik Evans stood at the center, hands still streaked with machine oil, his face only just losing its tense expression when a chorus of hesitant questions erupted from the veteran engineers. But before the crowd could surge forward, Clara Donnelly, the toughest, sharpest chief engineer at Emerson Robotics, stepped forward first. Clara, proud of her stellar academic credentials, her prestigious degrees, and her internationally recognized projects, stopped in front of Malik. Her sun-weathered face bore the lines of years in the workshops. Her eyes, seeking yet genuinely respectful, fixed on Malik, a rare honor from someone she'd never before publicly praised. She cleared her throat, voice strong, free of doubt. "Where did you learn all this? How did you spot the fault our entire technical team missed for 2 weeks?" Malik straightened slowly, brushing dust from his clothes, then met her gaze without a hint of arrogance or avoidance. His reply was clear, earnest, and just loud enough for the whole room to hear. "I learned from my dad, out on our farm." The room fell silent again for a heartbeat, people exchanging glances. A few younger engineers whispered, "His dad taught him this?" On a farm, fixing industrial machines. The oldest engineers furrowed their brows, as if stirred by some long-buried memory. From his corner of the room, Preston Hayes, still clad in his immaculate suit, fists clenched despite his calm facade, seized the chance to reassert his superiority. He sneered loudly, determined to drown out the respect gathering around Malik. "What's your father's name? Don't tell me some farmer guy trained our engineers here. Everyone knows real engineers aren't black farmers." Preston's taunt echoed, but few responded as before. Many younger engineers glanced away in awkward silence, though a handful still nodded, clinging to their professional worldview. That one boy from the farm couldn't possibly shake their reality. Malik neither bowed his head nor shied away. His eyes glinted. Steady, unflinching. He answered, each word deliberate and fearless. "My father is Calvin Evans." Absolute silence fell. That name hit the floor like a stone in a still pond, stirring deep ripples in the memories of the oldest engineers. Whispers spread. Evans? As in the Calvin Evans who led automated design at Henderson Machinery. Impossible! Calvin Evans was a mechanical genius. Heard he vanished from the industry years ago. Preston's confident smirk froze on his face, his composure cracking for the first time that morning. He stared at Malik, suddenly stripped of control, an anathema for a man like him. Questions burst out. Richard Caldwell, the veteran who'd worked alongside Calvin Evans on a famous project, spoke up, voice thick with emotion. "You're really his son?" "Your father. He was revered across the industry. He brought automation to small southern farms, could turn any scrap metal into a working machine. But why did he leave? After the accident, he retreated to farming and vanished from our circles." Malik nodded, a sad smile touching his lips. "He was hurt in that accident, but he never gave up on machines. He taught me that a person's worth isn't in skin color, degrees, or titles. It's in persistence and a true heart for their craft." In that circle of murmuring engineers, Preston felt the foundation of his world shifting beneath his feet. He tried to reassert authority with his voice, but Malik's words rang out like a clarion call to Emerson Robotics. Genius can come from anywhere, and prejudice only makes men like Preston obsolete in a changing world. The crowd quieted, their earlier jeers replaced by unspoken respect, eyes reflecting self-examination. Malik Evans, Calvin Evans's son, was no longer an outsider. He'd stepped into the light, carrying his father's legacy, pride, and an unquenchable passion. And in that electric moment, a secret long thought buried was revealed, one that would not only transform the fate of this young black teen, but also shake the very foundations of power held by those who once fancied themselves untouchable. The silence that followed Malik's answer shattered like glass as the name Calvin Evans rang out, a thunderclap shaking the very foundations of Emerson Robotics. No more laughter or doubt. Every gaze, from lead engineers to senior managers, swung around in unison, from Malik to the doorway leading back to the shop floor. To the veterans in the room, Calvin Evans was more than a name. He was a living legend in industrial automation, a rare black engineer who had broken through every barrier to become an icon for a generation. He'd graced the covers of prestigious trade journals, led breakthrough projects, and, most importantly, proved that a person of color could excel in a field once reserved for a white elite. Yet a terrible accident had shattered his career. After an incident in the lab left him with limited use of one arm, both his health and his professional standing took a devastating hit. Many rivals, and even colleagues who once praised him, turned their backs, citing productivity concerns to push him off critical projects. The harshest truth was that no matter how brilliant he was, those doors that opened for his achievements could slam shut the moment a black man appeared less than perfect. At the breaking point, Calvin quietly left the industry. He returned home, took up farming, and distanced himself from the city's glare and the social biases that had battered him. Yet he never abandoned his passion for machines and engineering. On that humble land, he became Malik's devoted teacher, imparting everything from mechanical principles to lessons on pride, resilience, and how to navigate a world riddled with invisible walls of prejudice. Before the whispers about Calvin Evans could fully die down, the door to the control room eased open. All eyes followed the tall figure of a black man stepping in, his stride calm yet unassuming. He wore a sun-faded shirt and well-worn jeans. Lines of experience marked his face, but his eyes were bright, deep, and composed. It was Calvin Evans himself, Malik's father. The room froze. People who'd read about him, heard him cited at conferences, now couldn't believe their eyes. They instinctively stepped back, some in confusion, others in awe, but all were struck by wonder. Preston Hayes watched too, his cold eyes flickering with surprise. He realized his power had just been truly challenged, not by a prank, but by the legacy and worth of a man who'd once embodied the industry. Calvin's presence alone turned everything upside down. Calvin walked over to Malik, resting a firm, gentle hand on his son's shoulder. Casting a sweeping look around the room, he spoke, his voice low and warm. "Hello, everyone. I'm Calvin Evans. I'm just a farmer now, but before I came home, I lived and worked in places like this, alongside machines like these. Today, I want you all to know I'm proud of my son." His words echoed through the space, bringing tears to the eyes of many veterans. For Malik, it was not just validation of his skill, but a powerful affirmation of his worth before a system that had once crushed him. Chief Engineer Clara Donnelly was the first to move. She stepped forward, extending her hand to Calvin with genuine warmth. "We remember you well, Mr. Evans. Without you, these machines would never have run like they did today." Those who had once pointed and jeered at Malik now stood humbled, speechless. Preston Hayes, at the edge of the circle, struggled to compose himself, his hand trembling. In his mind, a single question thundered. Can a power built on prejudice and exclusion survive in the face of real talent and dignity? The control room, once the stage for hierarchy, power, and color, became the site of an irreversible metamorphosis. Power shifting away from those who wielded it by force to those who earned it through talent, determination, and humility. In that moment, Malik and Calvin Evans reclaimed justice not only for themselves, but for countless others denied simply for being different. From that day forward, Emerson Robotics would no longer be a place for jokes about race or class, but a testament to true value, awakened at the very heart of long-standing prejudice. The moment Calvin Evans stepped in, it was like a fresh breeze sweeping through the control room. Under the harsh neon lights, faces that had been tight with scrutiny suddenly lit up with excitement and astonishment. Some even visibly moved, their eyes shining with genuine respect. Malik stood quietly beside his father, keenly aware of the shift, real admiration replacing old prejudices and mockery. Amid the murmurs of wonder, Preston Hayes struggled to maintain his usual air of authority. He forced himself forward, extending a reluctant handshake to Calvin with a stiff, polite smile. Their hands met. A handshake that seemed ordinary but carried layers of silent conflict. Preston squeezed lightly, fighting to hide the unease bubbling beneath his skin. In his cold gray eyes, the arrogance and smugness of earlier were gone, replaced by a wary, unsettled look, perhaps even a hint of fear. From the crowd came whispers, growing louder by the second. It really is him, the legendary Calvin Evans. Remember when he revamped that first-generation packing machine? No one's matched it since. Unbelievable, he came back for his son. The room's transformation felt like a miracle. Those who had been scorned, Calvin and Malik alike, now stood at the center of every gaze. Tentative handshakes and shy greetings, looks of gratitude and admiration swept toward the father and son, as if years of injustice could be healed in a single moment of triumph. Calvin remained composed, his calm pride clear as he glanced at Malik. Then, turning slowly to Preston, the man who had believed he controlled every fate at Emerson Robotics. He spoke, his tone measured but resonant. We never forgot how to create greatness, no matter our origins or skin color. To many, it was a simple statement of pride in his legacy, but to Preston it landed like a blow to the throne he'd sat on for so long. He realized that before him stood a man once cast aside for an injury and the color of his skin, yet who had never lost his spirit or professional pride. Calvin's very presence, tied to both past brilliance and present integrity, had rendered Preston's notions of power hollow and fragile. At that moment, Clara Donnelly, one of the plant's toughest engineers, stepped up beside the Evanses and looked Preston in the eye. Unhesitating, she declared, "Some values no one can take away, not even those in the highest seats." Her words drew nods from the younger engineers, their collective pride awakening. They no longer bowed to the fear of authority or the threats from management. Preston attempted a smile, but it came out strained and awkward. The crowd no longer focused on him as the center of power. Every glance, every spark of inspiration, had shifted to those once sidelined, those brave enough to prove that true worth transcends race, background, and social bias. As all eyes remained fixed on the Evanses, a young manager finally spoke out. "We wasted too much time turning our backs on people like them for things that mean nothing compared to real talent." The control room had been utterly transformed, Preston's veneer of power fading, leaving only the undeniable weight of truth. A person's true value lies not in status or skin color but in willpower, character, and relentless dedication. Malik looked at his father, eyes bright with pride and gratitude. He knew that at that moment, it wasn't just his own vindication but that of countless generations of people of color once dismissed as outsiders, now stepping forward, heads held high, in the heart of a factory that had long shut them out. That hesitant handshake between Preston and Calvin Evans, a symbol of two opposing worlds, would linger in everyone's memory at Emerson Robotics. The first crack in an old wall of power, opening the way for an era of truth, compassion, and rightful recognition. Since that awkward handshake between Preston and Calvin Evans, Emerson Robotics has felt a surge of new life. The atmosphere changed visibly. No more whispered asides whenever Malik or Calvin appeared, no more derisive laughs from the groups of engineers who used to gather in the halls to gossip about outsiders. The presence of the Evanses is now not only accepted, but has become a focal point of influence, a wellspring of morale and technical insight for a production line that had grown stagnant. Malik was quickly pulled onto the plant's flagship engineering project, something no one could have imagined just days before. Those who had once doubted and mocked him now jockeyed for seats near him whenever he presented his ideas. No one dared call him the janitor's kid or the black farmer's son anymore. Even the most seasoned technical experts had to admit that Malik's discoveries and improvements saved the line hundreds of thousands of dollars in the first month alone. Calvin's impact was equally profound. Although he'd accepted only a part-time advisory role, his voice carried farther than any formal manager's. Young engineers, and even graduates from top-tier universities, sought him out for advice on every new design or impossible concept. Each time he gently pointed out a flaw or a tweak, people nodded in quiet agreement, acknowledging the practical wisdom and hard-earned experience of a man who once straddled the line between genius and obsolescence. Perhaps the most remarkable change was in the attitudes of those who had once discriminated, from the old-school engineers to mid-level managers who'd eyed Malik with suspicion, and even Preston Hayes himself. At first, they listened only because of peer and executive scrutiny, but as Malik's ideas consistently proved their worth, Whether by repositioning a sensor to boost packaging speed or uncovering a buggy control algorithm, they had no choice but to acknowledge his talent. On one memorable occasion, Mark Benson, the very manager who'd publicly ridiculed Malik, stood up in a meeting to apologize for underestimating Malik's abilities and value. His apology was quiet yet powerful, prompting many to reconsider long-held biases in the plant. Standing beside Malik, Chief Engineer Clara Donnelly became his staunchest defender and ally. Whenever his ideas were challenged, Clara would rise to his defense, leveraging her own reputation to back each of his innovations. Once, when a group of veterans sneered at Malik's black farmer background, Clara replied coolly in the middle of the meeting, "If anyone here can fix a machine in 30 minutes as he just did, I'll gladly step aside as department lead." Now, the factory hums with energy. Everyone is eager to contribute. Those who once whispered and pointed now actively seek Malik's counsel, hoping to learn from him. Malik himself was surprised to realize that he'd changed not only the production line, but also the community's perception of diversity, perseverance, and self-belief. When Malik holds short training sessions for the younger mechanics, the rooms fill to capacity. Everyone wants to capture every insight he shares. Calvin often sits at the back, smiling with pride, his eyes reflecting the rare satisfaction of a father once denied recognition, now watching his son celebrated not for his skin color but for his intellect and character. Even Preston Hayes cannot deny reality. Though he maintains his cold exterior, his decisions have grown less autocratic. He's begun to listen to dissenting opinions. In private meetings, Preston has admitted to the board, "Perhaps I was wrong." Without them, Emerson Robotics would never have made such a remarkable comeback. Beyond the plant, word of Emerson Robotics' turnaround spread across the industry. Partners, clients, and even the press sought interviews with Malik and Calvin, holding them up as role models for a new generation of engineers, one unbound by origin, skin color, or credentials. As they looked into the factory's new mirror, those who'd once been victims or perpetrators of prejudice came to understand that genuine recognition, the courage to embrace new talent, and the willingness to set aside false pride are the foundations of a thriving community. And at the heart of this transformation, the name Evans, once dismissed, now stands as a symbol of Emerson Robotics' true rebirth. The dramatic transformation at Emerson Robotics, sparked directly by Malik and Calvin Evans, didn't stop at the factory doors. It quickly rippled across the media landscape. Within weeks, the story of the black farmer's son, once ridiculed, now celebrated as a symbol of ingenuity, perseverance, and triumph over prejudice, saturated newspapers, trade journals, and social media feeds. First came a local tech magazine's feature story. From the fields to the million-dollar factory, the black teen who saved Emerson Robotics. A photo of Malik, mud-caked boots, worn flannel shirt, standing beside the newly revived production line, went viral, inspiring not only African-American communities but millions of workers nationwide who'd also felt judged by their background or skin color. Within a month, major outlets like the New York Times and the Washington Post, along with top engineering magazines, ran follow-up interviews. TV programs invited Malik and Calvin as honored guests to share how they overcame adversity and the technical insights that saved the plant. Interviewers often asked Malik how it felt to go from being scorned by colleagues to earning their admiration. He would reply calmly, "I'm not proud because I proved the worth of black people, or those from humble beginnings. I'm proud that I kept my patience, stayed curious, and never gave up, even when I stood amid laughter and bias. Anyone can become truly valuable if they believe in themselves and keep improving." Those simple words became a nationwide rallying cry. On Reddit, Hacker News, and other tech forums, thousands of comments buzzed about the Evans phenomenon and hailed Emerson Robotics as a model of innovation tied to equality, where real merit counts more than pedigree or pigment. Engineering students flooded Malik's inbox with emails expressing admiration and a burning desire to learn from him. That groundswell of support even impacted the company's bottom line. Emerson Robotics' stock price soared to record highs, drawing intense interest from investors. International partners, from Japan and Germany to major Swedish and Israeli firms, reached out, eager to co-develop technology and fund projects led by Malik's team. In mere months, Emerson had climbed from near collapse to the top rung of America's automation industry. But the real turnaround went deeper than profits. Company culture transformed at its roots. Hidden barriers of race and background were dismantled. Leadership launched diversity-focused recruitment, offering internships to rural and underrepresented students. In every meeting, real ideas were heard and respected. Innovations were evaluated on merit and potential, not dismissed because someone lacked the right degree or traditional profile. Chief Engineer Clara Donnelly became the face of this new internal training policy, often reminding her teams, "We've learned a vital lesson. Intelligence, persistence, and passion don't care about skin color or resume. Look at Malik Evans. Once an outsider, he saved our entire operation and inspired us all. Never slip back into the shadows of old prejudice." Even the staunchest skeptics changed. Mark Benson, the manager who'd once sneered at Malik, publicly apologized in an all-hands meeting, then volunteered to lead a technical outreach program for underprivileged students. His gesture sparked a wave of community initiatives, STEM workshops in remote areas, career seminars for young people of color, turning Emerson into a hub of social as well as technological progress. For Preston Hayes, the story's antagonist, public pressure and unstoppable internal momentum forced a personal reckoning. At first, he grudgingly accepted changes to protect his position, but he could no longer deny the positive impact of this inclusive wave. In a closed-door board session, Preston admitted, "I used to believe power lay in controlling and suppressing differences, but it's diversity, trust, and genuine expertise that have brought Emerson Robotics back to excellence. We cannot move forward with barriers in our minds and hearts." Malik Evans's journey, from the son of a ridiculed black farmer to a living testament to kindness, resolve, and real merit, became a powerful parable for the entire American tech sector. It proved that any obstacle can be overcome when we dare to change, truly listen, and recognize each other with open hearts. And at the center of it all, Malik Evans, once pushed to the margins, now stands as an inspiration and driving force for a generation unafraid to dream big, live authentically, and shatter every prejudice that stands in their way. The media firestorm, the wave of innovation, and the renewed confidence at Emerson Robotics quickly brought the company's power struggles out into the open. Whereas Preston Hayes once could steer every critical decision with a glance or a single word, that influence has now eroded almost overnight. Voices calling for diversity, fairness, and fresh ideas have grown so strong that they've drowned out the closed-door politics and the entrenched conservatism Preston once built like an impregnable fortress. Even board members who long ago learned to nod along with Preston to protect their jobs can no longer turn away from reality. They've watched the company's value skyrocket thanks to unbounded creativity, cross-disciplinary collaboration, and, most of all, the rise of individuals once dismissed as outsiders. In board meetings, the hot topic is no longer the hard-line strategies Preston favored, but rather how to preserve the equitable, innovative spirit ignited by Malik and Calvin. In the corridors of headquarters, conversations have shifted. Instead of whispering about old rituals or Preston's displays of authority, people now talk about Malik Evans, the black farm boy who not only saved $1 million production line, but taught the whole company a lesson in courage and unbiased intelligence. And with Calvin Evans newly elevated to senior advisor for the entire corporation, the message is clear. Those once excluded or cast out can perform miracles once given the chance. Preston Hayes has become a lone figure in the realm he once ruled. In high-level meetings, he realizes he is no longer the center. His conservative proposals are now met with direct pushback rather than automatic assent. Whenever Preston attempts to reclaim the spotlight, leadership, and even the managers who once rode his coattails, unite behind the new direction, insisting that true value, talent, and diversity form the foundation of Emerson's future. Finally, the board reached an irreversible decision. Armed with sharp arguments, clear evidence of long-term benefits, and the undeniable power of change, they asked Preston to step down as CEO, something unthinkable just 6 months ago. Though he outwardly maintained his composure, inside, Preston felt a bitter sting. He had lost more than a title. He had forfeited the influence, respect, and the very image he had spent years cultivating in the industry. Preston's departure was met not with regret but with a collective sense of relief. Those who once cowered in his shadow now stand tall, free to work and grow in an environment more open and equitable than ever before. Meanwhile, Calvin Evans officially accepted his role as senior advisor to Emerson Robotics. He now serves as the bridge between hands-on engineering tradition and cutting-edge advancements, guiding young specialist teams beyond boundaries of background or credentials. His counsel extends beyond technical matters, rooted in a life philosophy. Technology has no color. A person's worth lies in persistence, the thirst for learning, and the courage to stand up again after a fall. Malik Evans, once the target of ridicule, has been appointed head of the Technology Innovation Group, a position Preston once claimed was reserved only for Ivy League elites. That decision won unanimous support from leadership, engineers, and production staff alike. Malik has become a living testament to a new generation's willingness to dismantle prejudice and seize control of their own destinies. For Malik, this honor is more than payback for years of disparagement. It's a real opportunity to sow the values his father taught him: humility, perseverance, self-respect, and faith in the power of community. On the day his appointment was announced, the entire plant rose in a standing ovation. Many wept, workers once scolded by Preston, engineers who once sneered at him, all moved by the realization that Malik's success proves one thing above all. When society embraces diversity, the most extraordinary achievements become possible. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner, Preston Hayes slipped out of the building that for so long had been his fortress of power. As he walked away, he faced the bitter truth. No matter how grand one's ego, it cannot endure when built on prejudice, exclusion, and fear of difference. At the heart of this new era, Malik and Calvin Evans, through their humility and bravery, have written the next chapter for Emerson Robotics, one in which talent, compassion, and diversity are celebrated as eternal values. The meteoric rise of Malik Evans, from a black farm boy dismissed by his peers to head of technology innovation at Emerson Robotics, has rippled far beyond the factory walls and corporate offices, inspiring society at large. If Preston Hayes' downfall marked the end of an era defined by conservatism and autocracy, Malik's journey ushers in a new age of hope, courage, and genuine merit triumphing over old wounds of prejudice. Within days of his appointment, Malik became the poster child for a generation of innovators, not just for his technical feats, but for the power of his story. Major manufacturing conferences, national and international STEM events, all clamored to host him. Whenever Malik spoke, the applause was thunderous. Hundreds, then thousands, of young people, especially youth of color, saw themselves in his journey. One spring morning at the Innovation and Social Equity in American Industry Conference in New York, Malik stepped onto the stage in a simple suit. Calm yet resolute, his eyes still burned with the fire of someone who'd stared down bias. Rather than read a prepared speech, he shared the moments spent beside a broken machine under skeptical gaze. The late nights helping his father repair tractors in that cramped barn. The taunts from classmates and neighbors because of his skin and background. Then he said, "Talent and determination don't care about race, background, or past. Don't let anyone tell you you don't belong here just because you're different. Turn that difference into your strength. Be patient. Sometimes one moment, one chance, can change not only your fate, but that of your entire community." The hall fell silent, and then erupted in applause. It wasn't just seasoned engineers and experts reacting, but students and those who'd once felt crushed by prejudice, now seeing in Malik proof that any barrier can be broken. On social media, the hashtag #BeLikeMalik went viral, spawning millions of personal stories. Young people of color, immigrant families, even white youth raised in poverty. Everyone found in Malik the encouragement to stand tall. Technical and STEM forums and even high schools began quoting his words in motivational assemblies, and some organized Evans Method workshops focused on persistence, continuous learning, and self-belief. Thank you letters flooded Emerson Robotics. Accounts of boys and girls daring to step beyond their comfort zones of prejudice, applying for engineering and science programs, and tackling internships at major firms despite the risk of discrimination. A black high schooler from Atlanta wrote, "Thanks to Mr. Malik, I believe I can become an engineer, even though they say girls of color belong in domestic work. I refuse to give up." Nonprofits and city councils in Chicago, Detroit, and New Orleans invited Malik to serve as an inspiration ambassador for STEM initiatives targeting minority and low-income youth. Malik never declined. He showed up at after-school programs, guiding students as they built robot models, speaking about the value of difference, and instilling pride in their identities and family traditions, no matter how humble. His impact even reached general media. Time, National Geographic, and The New Yorker featured Malik on their covers with headlines like, "A Young Leader Redefines American Strength, Shattering Invisible Chains," and "Intelligence Has No Color." Editorials hailed his story as a historic jolt for racial equity and youth empowerment. Within Emerson's new leadership, former skeptics and cautious supporters of Malik now spearheaded diversity recruitment, fair training programs, and internship opportunities for students of color, immigrants, and young women. They invited Malik to advise on corporate social responsibility projects, eager to spread his message wherever progress still flickered. Whenever he returned to his hometown, Malik visited his old high school, speaking in the same worn flannel and muddy boots. He looked out at the students with empathy and hope, because he knew true revolution isn't measured by $1 million production line, but by each child who dares to believe they can be different. Whether on the grand stages of international conferences or quietly standing in those very fields where he grew up, Malik Evans has held fast to one principle. Never let your differences become your chains. Use them as the instruments of your own destiny and for generations to come. And for Preston Hayes, seeing Malik's image flash across national broadcasts finally delivered a bitter lesson. Status and power cannot stem the tide of progress and courage. Preston now stands as a cautionary figure, a relic of what society must leave behind, while Malik has become living proof that every barrier can fall when people unite, show bravery, and believe in each other's true worth. Golden dawn light streamed over the long steel roofs of the Emerson Robotics plant. Once a fortress impregnable to change, now a living symbol of transformation. Malik Evans strode into the production hall, his worn boots still streaked with mud, but his step was steadier and more confident than ever. The air no longer carried the chill of fear and suspicion. Instead, it buzzed with laughter and animated conversation among engineers of every background, skin tone, and region. The automated line that had once been eerily silent, haunted by past failures, now glowed under bright lights and hummed smoothly under the coordinated efforts of diverse hands. Malik paused in the center of the floor, quietly taking it all in. He saw young engineers, white, black, Asian American, Latinx, debating new solutions openly, unafraid to reveal their origins or risk being washed out by prejudice. Every idea was heard. Every trial, whether it succeeded or failed, became a communal lesson. There was no longer a single individual or clique wielding unchecked power. Here, not long ago, Malik had been the black farmer's kid, jeered at, condescended to, and subjected to cruel tests by the old guard. But today, he was no longer an outsider. Under those high factory ceilings, he stood at the heart of the circle, with engineers eagerly soliciting his input and jotting down every insight, not out of fear of a boss, but out of genuine respect for the vision and competence of a true leader. Beside him, Calvin Evans, the father who had once been broken by a lab accident and then discarded simply for being an older black engineer, watched with pride and emotion. He stepped forward, wrapped his arms around his son amid the factory's busy rhythm, and whispered in Malik's ear, "You've done more than fix machines, Malik. You've changed how people value one another. From now on, no one here will be judged by their skin color or where they come from, or by what they've lost. You've opened the door for countless generations to follow." Malik squeezed his father's hand, his eyes bright with joy and the weight of responsibility. Deep down, he knew this journey was only beginning. Countless young people out there, other Maliks, were still silently bearing the shadow of prejudice, waiting for their chance to stand and prove themselves. And every success, every advance inside this factory was a beacon, a powerful message that true worth is defined not by birthplace but by will, intelligence, and the courage to press on. In that space, the senior engineers who once prided themselves on scoffing at Malik now freely shared their expertise, mentoring new hires from many communities. Stalwart managers who'd been Preston's enforcers became vocal champions of fairness and innovation. They told Malik and Calvin's story as living proof that anyone, if we open our minds and dare to learn, can rise above themselves. Even the posters around the plant changed. Instead of hollow productivity slogans, they now displayed engineers of every race standing together beneath the motto, "True innovation begins with true respect." Beyond the plant, Malik's story spread to schools, inspirational seminars, and even the curricula of leadership, HR, engineering, and community development courses. Children who once hesitated to dream big, and adults once shut out for not fitting in, now looked to Emerson Robotics as a lighthouse of hope and opportunity. For Malik, the work was far from over. He continued to visit rural schools, teaching alongside his father in hands-on workshops that passed on the spirit of perseverance, compassion, and unshakable self-worth. He pondered community-driven innovation projects, How to harness technology not only for large corporations but to transform life in remote towns and isolated farms, where every dream deserves fertile ground. In the rare quiet moments between his new responsibilities, Malik stood in the production hall, gazing at the kaleidoscope of colleagues working side by side, and smiled. Gone was the darkness that once overshadowed this factory. In its place was the dawn of a new era, where equity, intellect, and kindness took flight. As Calvin had taught him, a person's greatest legacy isn't their personal achievements, but the lasting change they spark in their community. Malik Evans, once a boy cast aside, had become a living testament to a new age, one in which every barrier can be torn down by willpower, perseverance, and the generosity of spirit. And this story will not end within these walls. It will continue to uplift everyone who has ever been underestimated or held back by skin color, origins, or past mistakes, reminding us all, dare to rise, dare to dream big, dare to care, and believe in your true worth, and you too can change the world. If this story moved you, please hit like, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you won't miss our next inspiring tale. We'll see you soon, with more stories to touch your heart and reignite your faith in the power of resilience, persistence, and compassion.